Let's be honest, most of us just want peace, a quiet place to come home to, a front porch where you can sip your coffee without feeling like you're on stage, a neighborhood where people wave, smile, and then go on with their day. That balance between friendliness and privacy, that's the dream, isn't it? But sometimes something shifts. It starts small. Maybe a neighbor always seems to appear when you step outside, or they casually mention something you're pretty sure you never told them. It's not a full-blown alarm bell, but something inside you pauses. That quiet tug in your gut whispers, something feels off. And here's the truth, that instinct is worth listening to. This isn't about becoming paranoid, it's about becoming aware. There's a fine line between a neighbor who's friendly and one who's subtly crossing a boundary, and the sooner you can spot that shift, the better you can respond, with clarity, not fear. In today's video, we're exploring 6 signs that someone's interest in you might be tipping from casual to concerning. Not to scare you, not to turn you against your neighbors, but to help you protect what matters most, your peace, your privacy, and your right to feel safe in your own space. Because here's what the ancient Stoics understood, and what still holds true today. Your power lies not in controlling the world around you, but in how you choose to meet it. You can't stop someone from being nosy. You can't control where they stand or what they think, but you can decide where your lines are. You can decide how to respond with strength without losing your center. And that's what we'll explore together. These 6 signs aren't just warning lights, they're tools. They help you see clearly so you can act calmly. They remind you that courage doesn't mean being loud. Sometimes it means being still, watching, choosing your next step with care. I'll also share a few real-world examples. Situations where good people trusted their instincts and quietly took their power back. Without drama, without panic. Just thoughtful action and the kind of calm awareness that Stoicism teaches so well. You see, Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a way of carrying yourself in the world. It teaches us that while we can't control others, we are fully responsible for how we protect our peace. That means we don't ignore red flags, but we also don't let them define us. We respond, not react, and we act, not out of fear, but with purpose. So if you've ever felt like something wasn't quite right, but you weren't sure what to do about it, stay with me. Because what you're feeling might not be wrong, and you deserve to live without second-guessing every creak in the hallway or glance across the fence. This video isn't about suspicion, it's about sovereignty. And if this message already resonates with something deep in you, make sure to subscribe. We're not here to feed fear. We're here to cultivate clarity, strength, and peace of mind in a noisy world. You're not alone, and you're not powerless. Let's begin. Let me ask you something, and has a neighbor ever mentioned something oddly specific about your life? Something you never told them? Maybe they congratulated you on a package that hasn't even been opened, or brought up a family member you've only ever talked about inside your home. The kind of detail that makes you pause and think, wait, how would they even know that? At first, it might seem harmless. Maybe it slipped in through casual conversation. Maybe you posted something online and forgot. But when these small moments keep piling up, it starts to feel a little too precise, a little too personal. And that's when you know it's time to pay attention. In today's hyper-connected world, information flows easily. Our walls are thinner, our devices are smarter, And our online lives are far more public than we often realize. It doesn't take a seasoned hacker to piece together fragments of your private life. All it takes is someone who's listening just a little too closely and watching just a little too often. But here's the important part. Don't panic. When your privacy feels invaded, your mind can jump to the worst-case scenario. But Stoic wisdom reminds us clarity beats fear. You don't need to spiral, you need to observe strategically. So what can you do? Start by setting a quiet trap. Mention something fictional, maybe a fake trip you're not taking, or an online order that doesn't exist. Say it casually, within earshot or in a place where sound might carry. Then wait. If that coincidental detail comes back to you from your neighbor's mouth, you have your answer. It's not foolproof, but it's effective. And more than that, it gives you clarity. Because when you can see what's happening, you can respond with intention. Also, take a moment to reflect. Where are you sharing information without realizing it? Could it be through open windows, thin walls, a public social media post, or even casual phone calls on your porch? Sometimes protecting your boundaries doesn't mean shutting down. It just means being selective, more mindful of what you share and with whom. Now let's be clear, while every neighbor is a threat, some people are just overly friendly or curious or socially unaware. But when someone consistently crosses the invisible line between public and private, you're allowed to say enough, even if that boundary is only clear to you. The Stoics taught us that what we allow, we teach. If we continue to share everything openly, even unintentionally, we signal that our lives are open to interpretation, to commentary, to invasion. But when we act with intention, when we become just a little more guarded, a little more aware, we reclaim something powerful, our personal space. So if your instincts are speaking up, don't dismiss them. They're not signs of paranoia. They're ancient tools designed to protect you. And in a world that often rewards oversharing, choosing privacy is not weakness, it's wisdom. Let's move to the next sign. Let me paint you a picture. You grab your keys, step outside to head to work, and there they are, watering the lawn. You come back from a grocery run. They're checking their mailbox. You walk your dog after dinner, and somehow they're sweeping an already clean driveway. Coincidence? Maybe once, maybe even twice. But when it starts happening, every time you leave the house, you can't help but wonder, is this just chance? Or is someone keeping tabs on me? It's a strange feeling when everyday interactions begin to feel staged. Now, don't get me wrong. Neighbors see each other. That's normal. A nod across the fence or a quick hello while grabbing the mail is part of community life. But what we're talking about here is a pattern, a consistent, oddly timed presence that starts to feel less like neighborly coincidence and more like quiet surveillance. The Stoics would tell us our instincts are not accidents. They're ancient signals meant to guide us before logic catches up. So if you've started feeling uneasy, if there's that little voice in you saying this isn't normal, don't dismiss it. You don't need to overreact, but you do need to pay attention. Here's a story that stuck with me. A man named David, a retired firefighter, liked to walk his neighborhood after dinner. Same path, same time. At first, it was no big deal when a neighbor a few houses down was out by his car each evening. But over time, it started to feel off. Rain or shine, early or late, the guy was always there, pretending to organize the garage, wiping an already spotless windshield, scrolling his phone without looking at it. David's walks began to feel watched, not directly, no words, no confrontation. Just presence. Quiet, repetitive, calculated. That's when it's time to trust what your body knows before your mind wants to believe it. So how do you handle this without jumping to conclusions or accusing anyone unfairly? Start with strategy. Vary your routine. Leave the house at different times. Take a new route and watch what happens. If their behavior shifts with yours, appearing once again wherever you go, you're not imagining things. And then start documenting. Note the time, the activity, the pattern. Keep it to yourself, but keep it consistent. If it turns out to be nothing, you lose nothing. But if it escalates, you'll be glad you took it seriously. Here's the bottom line. Your home should be your sanctuary. If something or someone is making you feel like you have to tiptoe through your own life, that's not okay. Stoic wisdom reminds us that calm awareness is more powerful than panic. You don't need to raise your voice to protect your space. You just need to be alert, prepared, and clear about your boundaries. And above all, remember, noticing isn't paranoia, it's presence. And that presence might just be the thing that keeps you one step ahead. Let's move on to the next sign. Let's talk about a sign that's easy to overlook because it hides behind something we all use every day. Technology. You might notice a camera pointed directly at your front door, or a strange Wi-Fi network that seems to appear only when you get home. Sometimes a conversation you're having near your devices suddenly gets interrupted by glitches, interference, or unexpected sounds. At first, you might tell yourself it's a coincidence. After all, everyone has security systems these days. Smart devices are everywhere. But when these patterns keep showing up, too precise, too often, it might be time to ask a deeper question. Is this convenience, or is it surveillance? This is the third sign. When someone begins using technology not to secure themselves, but to quietly observe you. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one, because in today's world, privacy isn't just about locked doors and closed blinds. It's about unseen signals, cameras, microphones, apps, and networks. The very tools meant to make our lives easier can also be used to erode our personal space, quietly, invisibly, and without consent. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be afraid. It teaches us to observe, to stay calm but not passive. And in an age where data is power, protecting your digital boundaries is just as important as your physical ones. So what can you do? Start by becoming a little more curious about your own environment. Walk around your property, look at where cameras are facing, not just yours, but your neighbors too. Pay attention to unusual devices, new tech installations, or even seemingly harmless gadgets that appear overnight. Check your phone or laptop for unexpected Wi-Fi networks or Bluetooth connections. If something feels off, reset your network, update your passwords, and disable auto-connect settings. Invest in basic cybersecurity like anti-spyware apps or signal blocking tools. And don't forget the basics. Unplug smart speakers when they're not in use. Keep sensitive conversations offline when possible. Even something as simple as turning off your microphone access can make a difference. You don't have to be paranoid to protect yourself. You just have to be aware. Remember, you're not trying to shut the world out. You're learning how to filter what gets in. You're not living in fear, you're living in clarity. The Stoics believed that peace begins when we stop outsourcing our power. And in the 21st century, that includes taking back control from the devices that are supposed to serve us, not watch us. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't jump to conclusions, but don't ignore it either. Because the longer you dismiss your instincts, the more room you give to silent intrusion. And here's what's powerful. The moment you start protecting your digital space, you'll notice something else change too, your mindset. You'll feel more present, more confident, more in control of your own narrative. Because this isn't just about cameras or routers, it's about your right to exist unobserved. It's about carving out a space, mentally and physically, where you can think, feel, and live freely. That's not paranoia. That's personal sovereignty. So take the time to check in with your space. Upgrade your awareness, just like you'd upgrade your software. And know this, being informed doesn't make you anxious, it makes you powerful. Let's move on to the next sign. Let me ask you something simple, but important. Have you ever come home and noticed something off? Your welcome mat, just a little too perfectly aligned, even though you didn't touch it. A potted plant slightly turned away from how you left it. Your mailbox ajar, even though the mail hasn't come yet. Small details, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. But still, something inside you pauses. That moment of hesitation, that quiet voice saying, wait, was that like this before? It matters, because here's the truth. When someone is too close to your space, it doesn't always show up in loud, obvious ways. It shows up in the quiet signs, the ones most people dismiss as nothing. But you're not most people. You're here because you're learning to pay attention. This sign is all about the physical world around you, your home, your sanctuary. When something starts to shift without explanation, even just a little, it may mean someone has crossed a boundary. Not figuratively, literally now. Let me be clear. Sometimes the wind moves a mat. A delivery driver brushes against a plant. Your partner forgot to close the mailbox. That happens. But when it happens more than once, and always when you're away, you owe it to yourself to notice. There was a man named Richard, quiet guy, lived in a calm suburban neighborhood. Every time he left the house, he'd tilt his doormat just slightly. A small habit, something only he would notice. One weekend, he came back from a short trip and found the mat perfectly straightened. He brushed it off, told himself it was nothing. But then it happened again. His potted plant, always facing the sun, was turned toward the street. A few days later, his mailbox sat open with no mail inside, no real damage, nothing stolen. But something felt violated, because this wasn't nature. This was someone. So what do you do if you notice things like this? Stay calm, don't panic, but start testing the space. Place a thin strip of clear tape on your door frame. Wedge a tiny piece of paper into the door jamb before you leave. Subtle markers, harmless but telling. If they've been disturbed, you'll know, and then start documenting dates, pointies, photos, anything unusual. Keep a log, not because you're being paranoid, but because you're being prepared. The Stoics would tell us that fear clouds judgment, but clarity empowers action. And that's what this is about, not fear, not confrontation, but truth. When your home starts whispering to you that something's changed, don't gaslight yourself. Listen, quiet invasions often come before louder ones, and the earlier you detect them, the more control you retain. You don't need to confront anyone right away. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone, but you do need to reclaim your awareness, your peace, your right to feel safe in the space you call home. Because your sanctuary should never feel like a question mark. Let's move to the next sign. Let's talk about something that's harder to name, but even harder to ignore. What happens when a neighbor crosses the line? Not with obvious hostility, but with something that feels like concern. At first, it might come off as helpful. They remind you that you left your garage door open. They comment on your packages or mention they noticed you got home late last night. They say things like, "I just worry about you," or "I keep an eye on the neighborhood, you never know." And maybe at first you even feel grateful. It's nice to know someone's looking out for you, right? Especially in today's world, where many people don't even know their neighbor's name. But here's the thing, healthy support respects boundaries. And when those boundaries start to blur, something deeper is at play. Over time, their attention becomes a little too consistent, a little too familiar. They start answering questions on your behalf when others ask, offering unsolicited opinions about your routines, maybe even hinting at what you should be doing with your yard, your schedule, or even your personal life. It sounds like care, but it feels like control. And that's when something shifts. This is the fifth sign, when a neighbor no longer acts like a neighbor, but starts behaving like a self-appointed guardian, as if your life is theirs to monitor, guide, or even manage. And here's the tricky part. Because their tone is polite, their words are well-meaning, it's easy to question yourself. Maybe they're just being kind, you think. Maybe I'm overreacting. But here's the Stoic truth. You know the difference between genuine concern and subtle control. One supports your independence. The other chips away at it, quietly, consistently. When someone inserts themselves into your private world, uninvited and under the mask of protection, that's not connection. That's encroachment. So what can you do? You don't need to lash out. You don't need to accuse anyone, but you do need to set boundaries calmly, clearly, consistently. You can thank them for their concern, but let them know kindly but firmly that you've got things handled. If they push back, keep your tone steady. You're not asking for permission, you're stating a boundary. And here's something to remember, your independence is not rude. It's a right. From a Stoic point of view, this is the kind of moment that defines your integrity. Marcus Aurelius taught that peace comes from within, not from trying to please everyone around you. You're allowed to protect your life from subtle overreach. You're allowed to live without commentary. You're allowed to be neighborly without being managed. Because once a person starts positioning themselves as your protector, it's a small step toward entitlement. And entitlement, no matter how softly spoken, is not kindness. It's control. So be kind, be composed, but be unwavering. You don't owe anyone access to your private life, especially when that access is disguised as helpfulness. Let's move to the next sign. Let's talk about a more subtle kind of warning sign. One that's easy to miss because it doesn't feel like a threat at first. It actually starts with a whisper. You're chatting with a neighbor and someone else's name comes up. Maybe it's just a comment. Did you hear what they did? Or a suggestion. I wouldn't trust them too much, just saying. At first, it seems harmless, maybe even helpful, but slowly without realizing it, you start to back away. You avoid certain neighbors. You stop waving as often. You feel unsure who you can trust, and before long, you're isolated. Not because something big happened, but because someone planted just enough doubt to make you step back. This is sign number 6. When a neighbor or acquaintance subtly starts to isolate you from the rest of your community. They don't do it loudly. They don't make a scene. Instead, they guide you away from others with soft suggestions, vague warnings, and sideways glances. And here's the hard truth. This isn't random. It's a tactic. Psychologically, it's called social isolation. And in manipulative dynamics, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Why? Because when you're disconnected, you're easier to influence. You have fewer people to turn to, fewer voices of clarity, and suddenly, the person who isolated you becomes the only one who understands. Sound familiar? Maybe you've experienced this in a workplace, in a relationship, or now with a neighbor who always has something to say about others, but never quite in the open. Stoicism teaches us to observe not just actions, but intentions. And when someone's pattern is to divide instead of connect, to sow doubt instead of trust, you need to step back and reassess. But here's the good news. You are not powerless. The antidote to isolation is connection. Reach out, reconnect with those neighbors you've quietly drifted from. Smile, wave, ask how they're doing. You don't need to explain anything. You just need to rebuild the bridge, brick by brick, moment by moment. And beyond your neighborhood, nurture your broader support system. Call your siblings, text an old friend, join a local class, group, or volunteer project. Because here's something Stoic wisdom reminds us of. Your peace doesn't depend on the absence of conflict. It depends on the presence of inner strength and meaningful relationships. Social connection isn't just nice to have, it's a spiritual shield. It grounds you, reminds you who you are, keeps you from falling into someone else's narrative. And here's another truth we often forget. Most people are kinder than we fear and more open than we assume. Sometimes the wall we think is around us was never really built by others, but by subtle influences we didn't notice in time. So if you notice someone repeatedly trying to steer you away from others, planting seeds of suspicion while positioning themselves as the only one you can trust, pay attention. That's not protection. That's positioning. You deserve more than one voice in your life. You deserve clarity, choice, and community. Let's move on to our final thoughts. So let's bring it all together. You can't control other people's behavior. You can't predict what they'll say, what they'll do, or how they'll see you. But what you can control, what you must control, is how you choose to respond. That's the essence of Stoicism. Real peace doesn't come from locking the world out. It comes from building strength within, from knowing that no matter what happens around you, your boundaries, your clarity, and your dignity are yours to protect. Because the truth is, your mind is your first line of defense, and your awareness, that's your greatest shield. This video isn't about fear. It's not about suspicion or living in a constant state of anxiety. It's about learning to recognize when something feels off and honoring that feeling with courage and clarity. It's about replacing panic with preparation, replacing helplessness with discernment. When you can respond with awareness instead of alarm, you begin to move differently in the world. You're not reactive, you're intentional. You're not shutting people out. You're simply choosing who gets to come close. And that choice matters more than we often realize. If a part of you has ever sensed something wasn't quite right, even if you couldn't put your finger on it, don't ignore that inner voice. That's your instinct. That's experience in wisdom whispering, pay attention. You don't need to panic. You don't need to accuse. But you do need to pause, observe, and act from a place of quiet strength. Verify, document, set boundaries, protect your space, not with rage, but with reason. Not by shrinking, but by standing tall and knowing what is and isn't okay for you. That's the Stoic way. And let's be clear, you don't owe anyone an apology for prioritizing your well-being. You don't have to explain why you're more reserved, more mindful, or more careful with your time and energy. That's not you being cold. That's you being awake. In a noisy world where everyone's trying to be heard, Stoicism invites you to be the one who listens to your instincts, to your values, to your own stillness. And if this video helped you put words to something you have been feeling, if it gave you clarity, validation, or even just a small reminder that you're not imagining things, then don't stop here. Subscribe to this channel for more content like this, practical tools, reflective conversations, and timeless wisdom to help you live with strength, intention, and inner peace no matter what life throws your way. And if there's someone in your life who needs to hear this, share it, because awareness grows when we pass it forward. One video, one conversation, one moment of clarity at a time. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who see clearly, move mindfully, and live with quiet confidence. Remember, setting boundaries isn't rejection, it's self-respect. And clarity, that's the beginning of real freedom. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay grounded, and I'll see you in the next one.